Hello and welcome to Unpacking Mormonism and Other Religious Trauma. Mason is making fun of me because I'm a hypocrite. And I'm embracing that.
Are you?
I am. I'm going to embrace the fact that I'm hypocritical. So for those of you wondering, this is our special guest today. His name is Mr. Henry. Henry. Well, this is Henry. He cheated death. When he was about 10 weeks old, his skull was crushed by another dog and literally almost died. He died in my arms and came back to life. I resurrected this dog and Jesus.
Wow.
Anyway, so Henry is with us today. He's a little brain damaged, so he will sometimes do goofy things. I promise he's just fine. He's very snuggly and he doesn't realize he's a dog. He thinks he's a human baby. Because he was literally nursed back to health as a puppy. So he's our mascot for the day. But go ahead, Mason. He's our mascot now. We do now.
Welcome, everybody that's out there watching, and for all those of you that are going to watch later, we're so excited to have you here. This is just our second Sunday School with Sarah and Mason, and just as kind of a quick little introduction, as both of us have struggled with where we want to be religiously, we've also made some progress in our lives with spirituality. Change. Yeah, just kind of a more recognition of our spirituality as opposed to our religiosity. And so this is kind of a thought that Sarah had, that maybe we could sit and talk about concepts that are beneficial to spirituality, but not really connected necessarily to a religion, and certainly not really an unpacking of religion like we do on Unpacking Mormonism and Other Religious Trauma. Right. We wanted to focus on kind of the positive aspects of things that can help us in our lives, unrelated to religion, but that are of a spiritual nature. Is that a fair description?
Yeah, I think that when I left Mormonism, I really missed having the opportunity to come together in our religious community and sharing messages that were meant to inspire. And so the idea for this really kind of grew out of wanting to have the opportunity to connect with other humans in a way that allowed for us to be inspired, but without the religious dogma, and definitely without the shame and the fear and the heavy reliance on books of scripture that I don't know. I kind of feel like a lot of scripture is mythological, and somewhat outdated. So really an opportunity to connect. Once again, as you know, we did on Unpacking Mormonism, the 4 pillars of wellness. We described spirituality as a way to connect with the other living things around us.
Yeah.
And that's really our goal here, is to provide messages that inspire so that we can connect. We also want to invite our audience to please join in. Our producer, Alex, is working hard behind the scenes, and we'll throw your questions up on the screen so that we can talk about those.
If you don't have questions.
Right, or your comments. We definitely want to see those things. And then if you like our program, we'd love to, put out a shout out. Please donate to our program. We want to make sure that we are able to pay our staff a livable and industry standard wage. And when you pay us, when you donate to the program, that helps us keep the show alive and makes sure that we are able to pay our staff. And we've got several people on staff now that work, very hard behind the scenes to make us look as good as we do. So please help us.
Yes, this is all photoshopped in live time so that we'll look good.
All right. All right.
So let me explain a little bit about just me and my history.
And I keep checking my phone because my daughter's at home with our little ones, and her words are being little shits. So just in case I need to step out to monitor the chaos at home.
So in my experience in religion and Mormonism, you can either give talks, which are more like speeches where there's no feedback, or you can teach lessons where, depending on the teacher, there can be a lot of feedback or not very much feedback. It can be more like a lecture. For me, it's always been about feedback. And so we're going to see how well this rolls, since who knows what kind of feedback we'll get. So we kind of will make this more of a conversation between us, just so that there's that feedback of a discussion type lesson sort of thing going on.
Right. And for those who are joining us who did not have the Mormon upbringing, a talk in Mormonism would basically be the equivalent of a sermon, or mass in other Christian based or common religions in the United States.
Yeah. So if you're here, hopefully you saw the announcement, you saw the quote from the Dalai Lama. If we can start with that one, that's number 2 there, Alex.
It's the Lama one. He said he named it Lama.
He said he named it Lama, yeah.
He named it Lama.
So I wanted to start with this idea that people take different roads seeking fulfillment and happiness. Just because they're not on your road doesn't mean they've gotten lost. What I really liked about this one is the concept of the fact so much of religion is about getting people on their road. So whether you're Mormon, Catholic,
non-denominational Christian,
Hindu, Muslim, whatever, there's in general, at least, this idea that we need you to be on our road.
Because ours is the only correct road.
Ours is the only road that leads to where we want to be. And so I really like this idea. And one of the things that has really helped me as I've gone through this spiritual process is to recognize that being on the same road is far less important as just being on a road and moving.
This reminds me of a lesson I once gave in Mormonism, where I took the Tree of Life. So for those that are Mormon, there's a story in the Book of Mormon about the Tree of Life, and it's, the dad, his name's Lehi, is at the tree, and he eats some fruit, and he's, looking around, he's like, ooh, this is the best fruit ever, and then he sees his family in the distance, and he beckons for them to join, and some of them do, and some of them don't, and the Tree of Life basically represented Jesus Christ as a savior, and partaking of the gospel fruits and the love of the Savior, the unconditional love of the Savior. And I remember giving a lesson because in Mormonism, they called the path to the Tree of Life was the quote unquote straight and narrow path, meaning it's straight, but it's skinny, and it's the only pathway there. And I remember giving a lesson that was to try and broaden the class's horizon on, it didn't matter where you started, the straight and narrow path was a direct line from where you were to Jesus. And I had a lot of feedback from that lesson because people were like, I'd never thought of that every person can travel that straight and narrow path differently, that it's not the same path, but rather it's a straight line to Jesus. Now that I'm not, my guess is most Christians would no longer identify me as Christian. And which is fine. That doesn't bother me. I don't care about the label, but I would say that, to bringing joy to others or doing goodness or living my standards or, kind of becoming or being who I want to be, that line, it doesn't matter where I'm coming from, as long as I'm heading in the direction of doing no harm, bringing joy, peace, connection, belonging to the people around me. If those are my primary goals, then it's about the direction I am traveling towards those goals that is so important, not necessarily the destination of getting there. And I think the reason for that is because in life, if we're like, I need to get to point C, unless we're traveling to Disneyland. If we're traveling to Disneyland, I'm going to drive till I get to Disneyland. We're going to enjoy the day at Disneyland and then go home. But when it comes to life goals and what we can do to improve the lives of others or improve our own life, that target is always moving. It's a fluid target. Life is always changing. Circumstances are always shifting. Different people are coming into our life.
Yeah.
And so there really isn't a final destination that I'm working towards, rather the goal of continuously being somebody that is approachable and who accepts people for who they are without any question. You know, we call that an unconditional positive regard in my field, but
okay.
That's kind of my thought.
So this idea, thank you. This idea kind of grew out of when I was a bishop. One of the things I like to teach in our leadership meetings was that direction is more important than location. And you kind of amended that in your advertisement for this, that direction is more important than destination. And I don't think those are synonymous, but they have a lot of similarities to them. For me, what that meant was I want to discover and choose which way I want to go. And that is far more important than where on that path I am. What's interesting is I taught a lesson similar to that after you had taught it. So, I stole your idea.
He steals all my good ideas.
Well,
and
if they're good ideas, they need to be used.
And good lines from country music. You steal that too and then quote them to people. Yeah. Totally,
yeah.
It's totally you.
Anyway, so I used that, and one of the people was in the class, one of the adults that was in the class was very unhappy with the idea. There were lots of different paths. But what's interesting to me is that in a religious context, you can accept that there's a path, or you can accept that there's many paths, but the destination remains the same. The destination is we have to get back to God. We have to do what God said so that we can go back to heaven or God or whatever your concept of eternal existence is. The destination in essence is the same. And so recognizing that that's the case can help us to learn to find what destination we want, but then just walk the path. Like you said, it will change a lot. So one of the things that happens when it comes to decision making is a little bit of this idea. We're all familiar with the Robert Frost, or most of us are familiar with the Robert Frost poem. That is 6.
I have no idea what poem you're talking about.
This is the one that says, a road diverged in a yellow wood, and
yeah, I have no idea what that. I'm not amongst most. Keep going.
How can I work with this? A road diverged in a yellow wood, and one was a well-worn path, and one was not very well worn. And near the end, he says, "And I took the path less traveled." And that has made all the difference. Basically, I'm very much paraphrasing on that, but that's the idea. But the point here is that oftentimes what we get is the idea that we can make a good choice or we can make a bad choice.
Right. It's very black and white.
Right. So there's this idea of two paths. We can either go toward God or we can go away from God. And, maybe in some places in our lives that's relatively true, but I want to kind of get away from that idea because of the black and white nature of that. It's very binary, like you have to go this way or you have to go that way. What I like instead is often this is number 5, Alex, this idea that, and this is central focused. So if you take the idea of like the tree of life, what you're saying is that you would put the tree of life in the center of that road mixture there, and everybody's moving toward it, right, wherever you're coming from. But when it comes to a spirituality thing, I'd like to reverse that and say, I start in the center of that. And I look around and I have a conversation with myself. Where do I want to go? Who do I want to be? And then I look at these roads and go, that one looks right for me right now. And then I'm going to walk that road for a little while, and I might find that there's another confluence of roads. There's all these stars of roads, and it's really about me recognizing who I am and deciding where I want to go right now. But then it's not so much, well, that road will take me here. I'm going to walk this road to the end. It's more of that road seems to be in line with what I want for myself right now. it doesn't really matter to me at the moment what's at the end of that road, because I'm going to get to another confluence of roads and then make another choice and another decision as I grow, as I learn, and make another decision about which direction to go. Does that make sense?
I'm so thoroughly confused. So I'm going to say yes-ish, maybe a little bit.
So
like,
let me...
I know you well enough to know basically what you're trying to say, but all of your roads in this road and a lack of specifics of what you're actually trying to say has left me a little befuddled. I'm befuddled. Is that a good word?
Sure.
Befuddled.
Sure. And if you're befuddled, I'm certain I've befuddled other people as well. So, Alex, can we do the Peck quote number 3? Let me go to this one and see if this will help kind of explain what it is I'm trying to say. The truth is that our finest moments are most likely to occur when we're feeling deeply uncomfortable, unhappy, or unfulfilled. For it is only in such moments, propelled by our discomfort, that we are likely to step out of our ruts and start searching for different ways or truer answers. How I feel like that applies is if I think about, instead of, so like in the Bible, it says that there's a straight and narrow path and few there be that find it, and there's a wide path and many there be that go in thereat. But it's all built around this idea that we're going from point A.
Where's that quote from?
It's in the New Testament.
Oh,
I don't remember where. There's something that Jesus says when he's teaching people that about the kingdom of heaven, that he's saying that the narrow path requires very restrictive behavior, essentially. And so not very many people find and walk that path, whereas the wide path is nowhere near as restrictive, and lots of people find that path and walk it. But the point here is that if you look at life as an A to B equation, meaning that I am where I am and I have to get to B, it doesn't allow for a lot of choice. It doesn't allow for a lot of introspection. And I'll give you a personal example. Growing up in Mormonism, I was very much a part of the process, a part of, this is where I want to be, this is where I want to go.
So let me slow you down. So what you're talking about is, in your personal experience, Mormonism gave you a prescribed path to walk in order to make it to the Mormons' version of heaven. So the Mormon version of heaven is, there's 3 degrees of glory. The top one, and then inside the celestial kingdom, there's 3 more kingdoms. Hang on, let me just
don't make it that complicated.
Right. So, but you, in order to get to the highest degree of the highest heaven, which is where most Mormons want to be, because that's where you live with your family forever and live with God forever, so on and so forth. In order to get there, you had to walk a prescribed path, and that prescribed path was following all the rules of Mormonism, and earning your way in. Mormons will say they don't believe that you earn your way, but they do when you break it down, earning your way to that highest degree. And as long as you were obedient in following that prescribed path, you really didn't have anything to worry about, because you would get there. Is that what you're describing?
Basically, but the emphasis I want is on one other aspect of that. That's described very well. But when a religion gives you a prescribed path with a destination in mind, in this case, heaven, which if you believe in heaven, everyone considers that to be an important thing. But if you get this prescribed path, you get the illusion of, I'm making all these choices of my own free will. But the reality is, I'm making choices, but they're not really of my own free will, because they've dangled in front of you, this is where you have to get to if you want to be happy. Basically, only a fool would decide to not walk this path and get there. Right. And so then the illusion of choice is there, but the reality of choice is not.
See, and I would actually disagree with that a little bit because I know I'm such a pain in the ass. But I would disagree because you do have your free will to choose something different, but the likelihood that you will is very small because in order for you to, like with Mormonism, because it's such a tight-knit, closed group of people, to choose outside of that, you risk the community that you have. You've been, unfortunately brainwashed and indoctrinated from the time you were itty bitty that this is the right thing. And so really what I see is not so much that you don't have free will, but that you turn off your decision making capacities, because all I have to do is put on the blinders, make these choices, and I'm going to get there. And, at least my experience in Mormonism was basically that we don't want you to think for yourself. We want you to just trust the leaders, trust these men that are your prophets, trust Joseph Smith, trust all these things. And that if you do all of that, then your kingdom in heaven will be amazing and it will all be worth it. But what ends up happening is I'm not thinking for myself anymore.
Well, because there's even the fear of, if I venture out of that at all, if I study anything else,
right?
If I look at any other materials that are not prescribed by that religion, in this case, Mormonism, I would be interested to know if others have had a similar experience in other religions, other religious organizations.
Well, I know the Jehovah's Witnesses absolutely do. I've seen that, and I've counseled people in that way.
Well, and that's
in very similar ways as Mormonism, where it's this is the way, and anything outside of that is dangerous. And then you get that, what we call like the fabricated happiness, where it's like, well, I've now left, I'm now outside of that system, and like what your mom said to you this weekend, well, you're going to be miserable without the doctrines of the gospel of Jesus Christ according to Mormonism. And then you were like, well, but Mom, am I miserable? And your mom said she didn't know if you were miserable or not. And when we said we're not miserable, we're really happy, we're doing really good, she didn't believe us, because she's been taught from the time she was little that if you're on the outside of Mormonism, then that's a fake happiness, that happiness is influenced by Satan. And so one of the challenges with religion is that you are told from before you can think for yourself that being on the outside is bad, evil, you're going to be harmed. Being on the inside is the best and the only way to go. And I see this across all denominations, all religions, but I also see this in culture too. When we look at things like, I'll use the transgender culture, what's going on right now is that my clients and my friends that identify in the trans community, they've got all these people on the outside saying, well, you're trying to be something you're not, and therefore you'll never be happy. But then the people who are getting healthy and getting treatment, they're like, hey, I'm doing great. I feel more authentically me. But the people on the outside are saying, no, you're flawed, you're wrong, you're bad. It's that type of a dynamic. Yeah. When in actuality, I am not trans. Therefore, I cannot truly say what it's like to be biologically female, but feel non-female or feel more male or non-binary. I don't know what that feels like. Therefore, I cannot speak to what that experience is, and whether or not somebody's happy or not, that's not my business.
Right.
Did I just derail us?
Well,
a little bit. That's great.
But that's all right. Mini roads. Alex, can you pull up the mini roads one again? Let's see if I can give this another shot here.
Well, before you do, can we look at this road, this many roads, but give us a self-identified goal or destination? So like for Sarah, I want to be the type of person where anybody, no matter your background, will feel loved and safe in my home, that if you speak with me, you will feel heard. Those are my goals. That's my destination. I want to get to a place where that is who I am. But I can take any one of these roads to facilitate that. And that I'm never going to get to a stationary location. Rather, I'm going to continually take different paths leading me to my ultimate goal. And if that ultimate goal for our listener is a place that is identified as heavenly in the next life, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But what roads are you taking so that you can become the type of person you want to be, that you feel is necessary for that heavenly destination? Does that make sense?
Sure.
I think you need to have some sort of direction or a compass. Alex, if you pull up that compass, depending on where I want to be, determines what direction I travel. But I'm more worried about the direction I'm traveling to get to my goal rather than getting to that specific location. Did that make sense?
Yeah.
Or did I just totally sabotage you?
No, if the goal in mind for this discussion is to learn to enjoy the journey,
Mm-hmm.
then there's not really any sabotage of it. Again, the whole idea that I'm sabotaging where you're wanting to get to is a misnomer, in that it often has to be a binary idea. Like, I'm at A, I need to get to B. Well, somewhere in the way is some sort of obstacle that is preventing me from getting where I want to be. So let me read. Can you pull up the Leach quote for me, Alex? Sarah didn't like this one very much, and so she can share why.
I liked it better this morning when I reread it, but go ahead.
So, finding your direction and purpose will require you to face situations and respond, and only you can choose your response. Now, what Sarah didn't like was the idea that we can choose our initial response, which oftentimes we can't. If we're presented with a situation, PTSD, anxiety, busyness, whatever, we will have some sort of response because the amygdala fires faster than the frontal cortex.
Right, so I'm going to actually change that to, you're going to have a reaction.
Okay. You're going to have a reaction, absolutely.
You're going to have a reaction, but then you can choose where to go after you've had that reaction. Now, if you have certain mental illnesses, especially PTSD, and it's a PTSD trigger, getting to the place where you can choose how to respond is going to take a little bit more time. But ultimately, you can get to a place where you choose your response.
Right, and that's kind of the point here, is that if you want to find your direction and your purpose in life, you're going to end up facing situations where you have to respond. The idea is only you can choose to respond. But then, so if you take this and if you pull up the mini roads again, what I see is me standing in the middle of this confluence of roads, and realizing that there are things that I have to decide in my life. If we go with your example, I want to be a person where everyone that comes into my life can feel love for me. Mm-hmm. Then you might look out at these roads and go and think to yourself, which one of these roads is going to take me there?
Right.
But what I see in my own life is almost this change of, there's these 12 roads. I want to be in a place where I can love everyone, and I might see that several of the roads combine. Because if love is what I want, there's many different choices that I can make that will bring me into a place where I can love everyone. And so I narrow my choices, but I do it. I narrow my choices. Whereas if you're on the outside looking in, so like with the Tree of Life example, I make a choice. Do I want to go to the Tree of Life or do I not? But it's a binary choice.
Right, there's only one way.
I'm looking at these paths and I'm going, either I have to walk this path or I have to not walk this path. There's nothing in between. So I have to make the choice. In religion, it would be, do I want to go to heaven or do I not want to go to heaven? Well, if I want to go to heaven, then I have to fall in line with whatever that religion or group prescribes as the way to get to heaven. Mormonism prescribes it more heavily, but all religion prescribes it somewhat. Some religions are going to be very high demand in that they prescribe almost everything about that path, and others are going to be like far less, far more vague, but still prescribing the path. So if I'm on the outside looking in, I make a choice, the path is prescribed. If I'm on the inside of that confluence of roads, I'm going to make a decision about where I want to get, maybe very specifically, maybe very generally. I think the idea that I want everyone who comes into contact with me to feel love is a relatively vague sort of thing, which is why I think some roads are going to come together. But the idea being not, the confluence of roads isn't the important piece. It's the idea that I make the decision to go in a certain direction with maybe only a vague understanding of what a possible destination is. It's not that I'm walking toward heaven anymore. It's that I'm walking toward being more loving. And I think that the way that we really learn to enjoy the journey is to decide what we want to be, what it is that our focus is right now, and start walking that path with always the reflection of, is this path actually getting me to where I want to be? Because now we're taking critical thinking in, and we're constantly reflecting on who we are. So I'm constantly reflecting on myself. I've walked 100 yards down this road, and I actually feel like this road is doing the opposite of what I wanted. Let me rethink and choose a different path. That's kind of what I meant by, like, if you start in this confluence of roads and then you start down one of them, shortly down that road, you might find another confluence of roads where you have to decide again, and you're constantly maneuvering to try and get to where you want to be. And you can do that because now you've learned how to recognize who you are and what's going on inside of you, but also critically think. You don't have the fear of, well, if I make the wrong choice, I'm off the path. I don't have that fear anymore, because I recognize if this doesn't work out well for me, if I've chosen the wrong path of these 12 paths or whatever, that's okay. I stop, I reconsider, I take another path. And for me, the enjoying the journey comes with not being worried about the destination as much as being reflective on what is going on in my life and how I am affecting the people around me as well. Does that make sense?
A little bit more. Yes. It's because I feel like, because you're talking in these generalities and these roads, it's just hard to follow because you don't have set examples that really bring that in. Like, I get the analogy that you're trying to make,
Right.
But my ADHD brain is like, well, but what about this? But what about that? But what about this? So that it's just my brain.
I think that's the joy of it, is that at each moment I can say, well, what about this?
Right.
What about that?
Well, and I want to make sure, if we've got comments, I think we're ready for some of those comments, Alex, if you want to throw any of those up on the screen here, if we've got some. But I think for me, if you go back to, Mormonism said, to get to the highest degree of the highest kingdom of heaven, you have to do it this way. And the beauty for me was being able to remove the blinders and choose for myself not only how I was going to travel the path, but what my goal, what my destination is. Mason, I can't read any of that.
So Amanda says, unconditional positive regard. My favorite takeaway from Gabor Mate's Scattered Mind.
Yes. So, and I can't remember. So Gabor Mate takes that. Number one, Gabor Mate is one of the best resources available to us today for understanding addictive behaviors and addiction to substances. So when we talk about anything having to do with addiction, Gabor Mate is one of the leading experts. And I cannot remember from my studies which founding psychological father it was that came up with unconditional positive regard. I would have to look that up to find out who coined that term. But that is a term in the counseling field, because our goal is, we know as counselors that we are going to have clients who have different values and different belief systems than we do as the counselor. And our goal as counselors is not to change the client's perspective to match our own, but rather help that client explore their values, their belief system, in a way that promotes them getting to where they want to be within that system. And if they want to change it, if they want, like, my belief system of this isn't.
Can I pause you real quick?
Yeah.
Amanda, I love the comment. I have a question for you, if you'd be willing to share something specific about how learning about
Unconditional
positive regard. How did that change the way that you addressed your own spirituality in your life? If you would be willing to share something like that, I think it would be very helpful, because like you said, I have a hard time sometimes with finding a specific example that will walk us through that path. But I think that when we share, this really helped me, if we take that one step further and say, well, what about that really changed the way that I work with whoever, a colleague, a spouse, children, religion, whatever. I think that might be very helpful in kind of focusing us on how something like that can really help.
So thank you, Mason, and I agree, great question for our listeners. But I think, and viewers, because we're not just listening today, and viewers, all right, squirrel. So anyway, there's my squirrel. Look at my squirrel. I love my squirrel. Oh, look, Henry, do you see the squirrel? He's like, no, I don't see it.
It's gone.
So anyway, when I have a client who is seeking a change in perspective or belief pattern, that does not give the counselor permission to say, well, this is what I believe and you need to believe the way that I do. Rather, our goal is to be a safe place for that individual to do some self-exploration. And we do that by asking open-ended questions and challenging where maybe their thought process isn't coalescing into something solid for them, but that unconditional positive regard was, no matter where the client is in their life, I'm here to see the positive in them, to help them travel their life journey in a way that is meaningful to them. And that was something that became very vital for me when I started working with perpetrators of sexual assault, because I had to be able, I had to turn off that part of my brain that was disgusted and angry in order to help that person walk through what they needed to heal, which would then reduce the likelihood that they might perpetrate again. And to put limits and boundaries, because there's definitely limits and boundaries that have to be there so that they don't. But that's really where, unconditional positive regard comes from, is eliminating judgment of others that impede healing and connection inside the clinic room. And I wanted to take that and make that more of a model for my life.
Nice.
And sometimes I succeed and sometimes I fail. So do we have other comments?
All right, Ian. Ian says, hi, with 3 exclamation points.
Hi, Ian.
Bike riders like to say it's not the destination, it's the journey. I add, it is also the food.
Well, yeah, and I think that that's really poignant Ian, and I love the biker motto of enjoy the journey, enjoy the wind in your face. I enjoy it more when I don't wear a helmet, which is really bad. But I do. So anyway, but it's when I got off the prescribed path of Mormonism, I was actually able to do what they kept telling me to do, like enjoy the beauty of the earth. Mm-hmm. When I was no longer over busy and overworked at church and constantly running from activity to activity to activity, I was able to like just go outside and enjoy nature. I was able to just relax, because one of the challenges when we've got a prescribed path in this destination is that I don't have to think. And when I numb my brain from thinking, I numb my brain from thinking in multiple areas of my life. And when I'm super worried about what's coming at some future date, I experience anxiety. And when I'm constantly ruminating about the mistakes of my past, I'm struggling with depression. That there's that cliche. If you're worried about the future, that's anxiety. If you're ruminating about the past, that's depression. That's very cliche.
And if you're doing both, that's paralyzing.
Yes, it is paralyzing. And it is very cliche, but we get those cliches for a reason.
Yeah.
And when I was able to walk away from that prescribed path, I felt more peace. And when my brain was waking up so that I was thinking for myself and making my own goals that fit what I most desired in life, I became a better version of myself.
Yeah.
I was able to love and meet that goal of loving others without condition much more effectively, but my anxiety levels were substantially reduced and my depression levels were substantially reduced.
So I thought of kind of a personal example here. First, I want to say, being on a prescribed path doesn't necessarily mean that you can't see the beauty in the world. And a lot of people involved in a high demand religion are able to see the beauty of the world, really focus on people. And I think that's great. One of the reasons we've never come that I can recall and said, hey, you need to leave the Mormon church or you need to leave your high demand religion. That's not what we're about, because a lot of people do find beauty,
right? That is where they find their joy
in that path. For me, so looking at this confluence of roads, an example that kind of comes to me is that you said something to me, I think we've shared before, but I don't know if we've shared on the Sunday school. When you were leaving the church, the Mormon church, and I was really struggling with that, you asked me basically the question, do you believe that Jesus knows us? And the follow-on statement from you was that if Jesus exists the way that you say he does, and if he knows me the way that you say he does, and if he loves me the way that you say he does, do you not think that he understands what's going on inside of my head and my heart? And that if I'm wrong, if I've made the wrong choice, leaving the Mormon church is the absolutely worst thing I could do, does not God and Jesus Christ, do they not understand where my heart is and the reasons that I'm making the choices that I'm making? For me, and that really, really struck me as a powerful statement. For me, if I give up the idea that heaven is a prescribed and specific type of even place, maybe if heaven is a prescribed and specific place, if I give that up, then I give up this idea that one path will lead me there. I give up the idea that I have to follow someone's set of rules to get there, that I have to fall in line with a certain set of behaviors to get there. And what I find then is I'm standing in this place where I'm in a way kind of this confluence of roads. I'm left with, well, my path is no longer prescribed. Where do I want to go? And I have to stop and think, like for instance, in Mormonism, to get to heaven, you have all these standards, right? One of them is you have to accept that the prophet is the one dude that can lead you to heaven, essentially, on the earth. You have to accept, you have to pay tithing. You have to live the law of chastity according to their standards. You have to live the word of wisdom, which is a health law according to their standards.
You have to go to the temple. You have to go
you have
regularly.
to be going to the temple. There's all these things. Well, if I step back, one of them is, are you honest in your dealings with your fellow man? I'm going to step back now. I'm in this confluence of roads because nothing is prescribed for me anymore. And I'm going to look and I'm going to say, what kind of person do I want to be? Does honesty matter to me? And then I'm going to look at myself, and in this case, I did. I looked at myself and said, well, does honesty matter to me? Yes, it matters a whole heck of a lot to me. Honesty is very important. But now I'm making the choice not because I have to be honest to get to heaven. I'm making the choice that I have to be honest because it's true to who I want to be. And it's not about the destination now. Well, honesty will get me here. It's that honesty is something that I want. And there are things connected to it. Like it could be, I really want to stay married and in a happy relationship. Well, honesty is going to be a big part of that. But I'm making the choice. And it's something that is right here. It's not heaven that's going to happen somewhere down the road that I can't see.
Right.
It's a relationship right now that affects me.
Well, and really it's, I'm honest because honesty is who I am. I am an honest person.
Yes.
And I think something that's very fascinating is when I was going to school, and I this is just coming up, so I don't have the study to share with the group, I know, but most children, when they're itty bitty, don't like violence. Like little kids love guns and robbers and superheroes and that type of thing.
But it's not a real
thing. The reality of violence is something that they're going to feel icky about. And I feel like what we do is we give these humans, these young children, this box that in order to be, Henry decided he needs to come up. He can't jump up because of his brain damage. He just can't do it. So anyway, because we give these kids these box that in order for you to be a good person, you have to, and then we try and fit it in a box.
Yeah.
And what I have found in raising my own children, my oldest kids to my youngest kids, I've got great kids, y'all. I have 7 of the kindest, most beautiful children.
Pausing again. Alex, any other comments that you can pull up? Because we'll be ready for them here in just a second.
Yeah, absolutely. But my point being that with my younger kids, instead of saying we don't hit our brother because that's wrong, we talk about, what was going on for you that led you to hit your brother? How does hitting your brother make you feel? And, they talk about, well, I feel better because they deserved it or something along those lines. And we get to explore that. Really what we're doing is helping them get to know themselves better so that they can live their life in alignment with the people that they want to become. Not because they're going to get to go to heaven, but because people feel freer when we're able to live according to and I'll take this from Mormonism, according to the dictates of our own conscience. And so if I'm honest because I value honesty and it's important to me, my honesty is now coming from a genuine, authentic, raw, natural place from within me. But then I also recognize when I'm being dishonest, instead of saying, ooh, I'm sinning, I'm able to ask myself, what am I afraid of? I'm not acting in accordance to what's valuable to me, what's going on. And rather than going, oh my gosh, I lied, now I have to repent, I can critically analyze what's going on for me so that I can understand it and get back to the place I want to be rather than living out of this fear of good and evil all the time. I can't read those.
You're now able to look at the situation from a curious place
rather
than an ashamed place.
Right, which gives me more ability. Like that allows my brain more. What are you licking on my shirt? He's licking my necklace. That allows me to move. What Brene Brown talks about is when you're in a place of shame where it's like, oh my gosh, I have to repent. I've got to, I'm in this place of shame. It paralyzes our brain.
Right.
Whereas when I stay in that curious mindset, if I feel guilty for lying, and then I'm able to say, okay, so what was I afraid of? What led to this? And I'm able to analyze that data, then I can shift.
Yeah. When I think of shame, I think of, curling into the fetal position and making yourself very small.
Yeah.
When I think of curiosity, I think of
little kids
looking around and making me a part of something that's really big.
Yeah.
And I think that really leads to the health there. So, all right. Pilot says, with the place you are in your spiritual journey, do you believe in heaven or hell?
So this is a great question. I am in a place in my life where I don't believe that a devil exists. The whole idea of heaven, hell.
Because he has you entirely in his grips.
Right. Yes, I am what Mormons would call a heathen. I'm so deceived by Satan that I don't believe that he exists. I don't. I believe that.
The irony is that the path that you teach is very much in line with the principles of what kind of people Mormons are supposed to be.
Right.
So you're a heathen because you don't hold to all of their prescribed assessments, but you really are the kind of person that they value.
So, but to answer Pilate's question, I don't believe in a hell. And I don't, not in a literal hell, not in like the Mormons' outer darkness or Christianity's hell. I don't believe in that. Because
I do. It's in Arizona.
It's Arizona, really. It's definitely hot. I was gonna think you were gonna say like Iraq, because you've been there too, and it's much harder there than it is in Arizona. But no, I don't believe in a Satan. I think that just the natural part of life is hard enough. Things like I'm raising special needs kiddos, and some days it's quote unquote hell because it's so challenging and life is so unfair that I think that that's hell in and of itself. And I feel that as we learn how to accept and embrace the suck, taking something from the military, embrace the suck because we can't change it, and learn how to navigate around it and do the best that we can, that we will find joy. And that's something that in my field we call radical acceptance. As far as a God or a heaven, I have had some very personal spiritual experiences that maybe let's actually make our next Sunday School with Sarah and Mason about spiritual experiences that make Sarah believe that there is something greater than us, a God or a heaven or something. I've had some very personal spiritual experiences that I wasn't seeking at the time that they came. And then my study of near-death experiences and the things that I hear people say across all religions and cultural backgrounds leads me to believe that there is definitely something bigger than us that connects us to each other. And maybe the closest that we can get to describing that is, quote unquote, a heaven. But the specifics of what that looks like or what God potentially is or isn't, I don't need to know those things to strive for goodness. I feel that if hell is here on earth in the challenges of everything around us, then heaven is as well. And that I can find those heavenly moments when I am at my best, when I'm at the finest, and that I believe that there is something later, but I don't know what that is. But I also don't feel like I need to know what that is to be a good person. So I really hope that answers your question, Pilot. If you have a follow-up statement or question based on that. Mason, what about you? What are your thoughts about heaven and hell? Because I just answered that like I'm the only person in the room. So Mason, do you believe in a heaven or a hell?
I'm very comfortable right now in a place of saying, I don't know. I don't think that I'll stay in that place. Not being comfortable not knowing. I intend to stay comfortable not knowing for a long time, probably for the rest of my life. But as far as heaven and hell, God, and all that stuff, I expect that I will figure that kind of stuff out and make it an assessment decision, or even be prompted by God or whatever as to what the reality of that is. Right now, I've given up the ability for the need to go to heaven to control my life.
I like that.
I've given up that ability right now because I need to figure out what it is that I want on a spiritual level as well. So,
I really like that. Well, and I think
any other comments, Alex?
I think this is the first show that the public is going to be seeing with the announcement that you've
No, not yet. We recorded it last night. It hasn't posted.
Right. Well, and even your solo episode, because I was so junky I couldn't speak, posts tomorrow. So I guess this is the first one. This is the first announcement for those of you that are listening. Did you want to share that?
Yeah.
Oh, he doesn't want to share it. If you want to know what we're talking about, listen to the next 2 episodes. Go ahead.
All right, Amanda. I believe that love is the creative force of the universe. I love that.
Yes, amen. I can
that.
quote that for sure.
I hold myself in unconditional positive regard, and I absolutely love that. I think that really the first power of unconditional positive regard is giving it to yourself.
I agree with that.
I think it's difficult to give unconditional positive regard to others if you can't give it to yourself. Brene Brown says that you can't love other people more than you love yourself.
Right, and
that's the idea that I'm thinking.
I agree with that, but I also want to grow that and say that, I think of like Jim Fields, who was my first counselor that I actually was able to see for a while. He held me in unconditional positive regard. He did that for me while I was learning to do that for myself. Mm-hmm. So having that for other people is vital, because I think that as I hold that space for others, they learn how to do that. But then I also agree, as you learn how to do that for yourself, you are better able to do that for your others, which I think is so connected, because as we learn how to do that, it improves the lives of everybody around us.
Well, and I probably
love that.
I think, again, if you take the black and white statement that you can't give someone else complete unconditional positive regard unless you've given it to yourself, is probably not accurate, because we're all on a path of figuring out.
Well, and some people learn how to do it for others before they learn how to do it for themselves.
Yeah. All right, so I'm starting over.
Once you get it for yourself, your ability to extend that to others is going to become so much easier. Yes.
All right, so starting at the beginning again, I believe that love is the creative force of the universe. I hold myself in unconditional positive regard in order to be a part of the force of love. And I can't vocalize self-critical messages because that would be outside of the spirit of love. I love that. I do make it a practice, though, to reflect and set intentions to work differently, act differently, and still be in 100% of the framework of unconditional positive regard. But it took me 50 years to get here. I love it. Like I could feel fulfilled by just reading that again. I feel like, Amanda, you just said that so well.
I think Amanda just summed up our entire episode today. Way to go.
I don't even want to comment on that anymore. I feel like it was so well said that it is love that we're looking at, and love involves loving ourselves. And recognize that, like, there was one quote on here that I got that I liked, but wasn't really a part of this, that accept the world as it is and then learn to make it into what you want it to be. I think it's kind of that idea. I love myself as I am. And then as I self-reflect and go, you know what? That's not what I want to be. Right. Then I change myself, not because I hate myself for that, but because I love myself enough to make myself better.
Well, and something that was really hard for me in Mormonism was the idea that God could not look upon sin with the least degree of allowance. That He created me to be imperfect, and that my imperfections were so disgraceful that He couldn't even look upon me without having His other son, my brother, come down and be just brutalized.
Right.
To cover that so that God could then look at me better. And what Amanda just said speaks more of the type of God that I envision God to actually be, which is love everybody. And I know that almost sounds oversimplified, but when you reach that point of self-love to where you can then extend that love to others, the God that I see looks upon my foibles and weaknesses as a human and just loves me for it. And I don't need some over the top sacrifice to make up the difference, because if there is a God, he's great enough to recognize that, of course, I've got flaws and foibles, and he's going to love me no matter what. And the reason that I would say that's kind of where I'm like, if there's a God, this is the God that I see. And I keep saying he, that's because that's the type of God I woke up with. Yeah, honestly, God's got to be a woman.
It's more of a they them.
It is. No, it really is. I think that if there is a God, that God is non-binary, that it absolutely is a they them. 100%. I do believe that. But as I have been able to master, and for me, it's not fully mastered. It comes in small bits, little pieces here and there. But when I rock it, when I get it, the amount of love I feel for myself and others is beautiful. I don't need somebody to make up the gaps in mistakes. I'm able to love in spite of those.
Well, I don't think that the statement God can't look at sin with the least degree of allowance means that he can't look at us. But I can see why that is the message that is received.
But I was told I couldn't be.
Often. Right. You couldn't be in the presence of God.
I couldn't be in the presence of God. And I mean, even in the temple, I had to veil my face. I had to cover up for God.
If you think about life,
I don't like that.
It's very difficult to have any kind of real influence on anybody in your life if they don't feel love from you.
Well, if for me it was, I can't have an influence on somebody's life because I'm too busy telling them where they need to repent and where they're whatever. So in Mormonism, we were always focusing on what I was doing wrong. It was never enough, that I never felt truly loved.
Yeah.
All right.
So Michael is answering the question here. Unconditional positive regard was initially conceptualized by Stanley Standall.
That is not what I learned in my schooling, because I've never heard of that name. But I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just like,
Dr. Google has a different opinion.
Dr. Google has a different opinion. No, somewhere in my, well, and maybe I did hear that word. And I'm not doubting you, Michael, not at all. But that's a name I've never heard. I'm going to have to go back and research that. But thank you.
So there's one last piece really that I wanted to share here.
Well, and are there other
comments? We're getting close to the end here. And I will take those other comments. Pilot says, it seems like through history there is a tendency for groups in power to define something as the enemy or sinful or evil. Is evil real? I love that. Ooh. I think that really speaks to what you have just said about Satan and whether or not Satan exists.
And I want to say, Pilot, that's normal. As we look at humanity, that's a normal part of being human. Humans love myth. We our brain seeks understanding of things that can't be understood.
Humans love power, and they recognize that myth really creates power. I was having a conversation with my son the other day, talking about World War II. He loves history, and he was talking about World War II, what happened, and I said, well, why did Germany attack the Jews? And I said, there's lots of reasons, but one of the reasons was Hitler utilized the hate of another group to unify his people. And so in a lot of ways, the evil that we define as evil is really about uniting one group against another group. I maintain my power because you can't be around those people. They're evil. In fact, we probably should just wipe them out.
Well, and I do believe that there's evil in the world. I just don't believe that evil is produced by Satan. I believe that evil is the darkness in humanity, that I have evil in me, and that if I'm exercising that evil, it's that I'm purposefully harming another person so that I can make gains. And so I would say that for me, goodness or evilness, righteousness. Righteous, I think, is a great term the way our producer uses it. Like, righteous, yeah, righteous, that's awesome.
Like the turtles from Finding
right,
Nemo, right?
Yes, there you go. Yes, that kind of, I think it also came from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I think they said it as well. So I believe in that type of righteousness. But goodness and evil really for me is, there's opposition in things, but I don't think that it's a product of Satan. I believe that Satan is a myth, and that evilness is a part of our humanity, and that it's when humanity intentionally harms others for their own personal gain. I feel that is where the root of evil comes from, not from some mythological dark spirit, but that it is a part of all living creatures, and that some of us tend to embrace that darkness in us more than the goodness. And I think that one of the main reasons people move into that dark space is a way of coping with the horrific things that have happened to them, and they don't have the tools to respond differently. And so people in pain cause pain. Yeah. And as we can work to heal that pain, we're going to find that a lot of that darkness goes away. Yeah.
Are there
any other final comments? Because
he says no more comments.
We are needing to close this. We're at that hour.
I know mark. We were only going to go like 30 to 45 minutes, but here we are at an hour.
Yeah, I really think that Amanda really summarized what our goal was here. And that is, as we strip ourselves from the expectations, from those outside influences of what we are supposed to be, and we really dig into ourselves to say, what is it? Who do I want to be as a person? And that desire becomes the destination. Yes. And that we then embrace the fact that that destination is not a final location. It is something that we will work on every day until we pass. And if there's more days beyond when we pass, then we get to reevaluate and decide what we're going to do at that point. Yeah. But that I know for me, my destination is the journey. And that as I travel that path so that I can become and emulate the type of person that I want to be, that I am a much happier person rather than trying to fulfill somebody else's statement of how I'm supposed to get to goodness. I think that goodness is in all of us. And as we explore our own interpersonal goodness and reflect, as Amanda said, and recognize that, Amanda said it took her 50 years. Yeah. I'm 42. I'm not going to have it mastered by 50 years. I hope to.
I definitely will.
I hope to have it mastered 98% of the time.
There you go.
That's my goal. So thank you so much.
I want to leave you with a question. When we're looking at the idea of enjoying the journey, I want you to think about what stands in your way. What prevents you from enjoying the journey? And if you can start to recognize those things, naturally what grows out of that is, okay, well, how do I manage that? What do I do about those things? But you have to identify them first. So what stands in your way? What stands in my way? Unrealistic expectations often stand in my way.
That's usually the biggest one for most people.
And I think that just recognizing that we're expecting too much from either ourselves or from a situation, a colleague, a child, do that all the time, expecting too much from a child, like this morning. But if we...
For more information, listen to Raising Crazy Growing Up to show. Keep going.
If you can take the time to discover what stands in your way from enjoying the journey, then you can start to process and eliminate those distractions, those barricades on our path, so that it can be really all about the journey. And that is how we grow into the kind of people we want to be and just enjoy that process.
And start practicing grace. As Amanda said, unconditional positive regard for self.
Yes.
Is very valuable when you are working at connecting with other living beings on a spiritual basis. So
thanks
thank you
for
so
sticking
much
with us for an hour and really helping us to just kind of talk out some concepts that have helped us. As I know I've learned today, and that matters a lot to me. So
great.
Thank you.
We will see you next month. We will announce that date in our newsletter.
It's gonna be the third, right? Third Sunday of the month.
It's going to vary depending on if you are on call and if we've got our producer in town. So we will announce that date for our next one, and we'll be talking about the reality of heaven. Is heaven real? And we'll share some of our personal experiences and some of the research of near-death experiences, and of course, let you decide. So thanks so much. See you next time.
Thank you, guys.